Hey everybody, how we doing? All right, I see JC already here. Danny's dropping in. We got the questions flowing already. We have our start sits AMA situation going fast and furious here because the inactives are flowing in, and I'm already getting some questions. So we're going to start quick. No need for long introductions. I'm Drew Davenport, your fantasy football lawyer. Thank you so much for joining me for the week 2 start sit AMA. And it looks like we are getting some interesting stuff happening here. All right, CJ Stroud is in. He is going to play today. Looks like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is active. I hope you weren't relying on him, but he is active. Mark Andrews is active today and will play, make his season debut. Looks like Chris Evans is sitting for the Bengals. Joey Bosa is going to play for the Chargers defense. Let's see what else we've got here. Buccaneers, nobody cares about that. Travis Kelce makes his season debut today as well. All right, that's about it for right now. Oh, it looks like Chase Claypool is going to play. Once again, hope you're not relying on him. Aaron Jones and Christian Watson, as we anticipated, are not going to play. All right, JC wants to know Puka Nacua or Tyler Lockett. Well, JC, here is the thing that I'm thinking about for today. I don't think we can give up on Tyler Lockett quite yet. Puka's week last week was insane with the targets. They have a tough matchup this week, but I do think that the Rams will be able to throw the ball, and I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball on the ground at all. So they're going to have to throw the ball. So I think both guys are decent options today. I don't know that I trust either one at this point, but Tyler Lockett has a fantastic situation there against the Detroit Lions. I think you got to roll with Lockett one more week and see if he's going to be all right. The frustrating part for fantasy managers last week, Jackson Smith and Jigba was clearly third, while DK Metcalf and Lockett were running up. They were above 90% route participation last week. Jackson Smith and Jigba was clearly third. Having said that, he was the highest targets per route run percentage on the team. So when he was on the field, he was earning targets at an elite level. So I still believe that Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are fine fantasy assets. The problem is we don't know how much he's going to continue to eat into that target share. But I still think we got to give Lockett another week, and it's not a bad matchup and certainly should be a high-scoring game. So, JC, I'm taking Lockett there. It's a slight lean over Puka Nacua. Danny wants to know Dotson or Elijah Moore, half PPR. Well, I'll tell you what, I love Elijah Moore this week, but I love Jahan Dotson more. So, Danny, I'm going Jahan Dotson there. I believe that the Dotson's in the same spot that Jacoby Myers was last week. So I know that that's not a one-to-one comparison there, but I think that Dotson could have a huge week. He was involved early on. The early game script for Washington last week seemed to be that they wanted to get Dotson involved. Now, when they got off of the scripted plays early in the game, he wasn't as involved, but it tells me that the coaching staff and Sam Howell really likes him. I think they're going to use him a lot today in a favorable matchup for Dotson. It looks like Surtain will be on Terry McLaurin. So love Elijah Moore, but we also don't have any clarity about Amari Cooper right now. So I'd prefer Elijah Moore if Cooper's out. So I'm rolling with Dotson there, Danny. All right. Chief Matt is asking about half PPR, Kyron Williams, Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, or Antonio Gibson. Leaning towards Kyron here. Oh boy, that's a tough one. The problem is the Ravens backs, we have no idea how they're going to split things up because we know obviously that Justice Hill was mixed in first last week. And I understand that the tendency is to say, hey, he's going to be the guy who's going to go into the game first this week. And that could be the case, but he was incredibly inefficient last week with 8 carries for 9 yards, and he scored 2 touchdowns. But I don't necessarily know that we can say that that's definitely going to happen this week. So I think that what we have to do is throw out the Ravens running back situation right now. So I think it's Kyron Williams or Antonio Gibson for you. I'm not willing to gamble with Gibson. He looked so bad last week that I'm a little bit concerned about how much they're going to use him going forward. Now, he could be in for a bounce back, but I don't think that we want to count on that in week 2. So I think you said leaning towards Kyron here. I think that's where my analysis leads me as well. I don't want to touch the Ravens running back situation right now. We got no clue how that's going to go. Antonio Gibson's radioactive right now with a fumble last week and 4 touches. So I think you just have to go with the volume play with Kyron Williams. He was the one running the most routes last week. So he certainly is the guy that they want to use in the passing game. He also came in at the goal line. So I think it's Kyron Williams. It's a brutal matchup here. So I wouldn't expect much out of him, but your 4 options aren't the greatest, as you obviously know. So I think you got to go with the volume here in Kyron Williams. JC, what's up, brother? Shaka, brother. What's happening? Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate all your support, JC. Danny, no problem, buddy. No problem. All right. Let's see. If you guys got any more questions, drop them in the chat here. Let's look back over the recent inactives announcements here. Looks like David Bakhtiari is out. Bosa's going to play. Andrews is going to play. Stroud is going to play. Laramie Tunsil is out. That Texans offensive line is in shambles. Folks, this is just a bad situation. If you drafted Dameon Pierce to be, a high upside RB2, I think we're going to be missing the high upside part because it is just that Tex. I believe there's been 4 offensive line injuries for the Texans already, and Laramie Tunsil's, a huge loss. So Dameon Pierce is just one of those guys that I'm trying to avoid starting if I can. I have to start him in one league. I ended up getting him as my RB2 in one league, and I have to start him, but I don't feel great about it. And the problem is the offense itself is just they're going to be limited all year. So I have my thing with Dameon Pierce is, unfortunately, it looks like he was overdrafted, and I just can't get on board with it. So let's look and see what else is going on. DeAndre Hopkins is going to play, folks. DeAndre Hopkins will play this week. What's my take on DeAndre Hopkins? Well, I said this during the week. There was a lot of people that were saying that Hopkins looks like he wasn't going to play because he logged 3 DNPs this week. He did not practice at all this week. But if you saw the interview with him, he certainly left the door open to playing. And for what it's worth, DeAndre Hopkins is one of those guys who's always been a grinder on injuries. He's always been a guy who shows up on game day, even when he's banged up. So he's playing today. And this isn't like a hamstring, a muscle pull. This is an ankle injury. So it's more of a, hey, can I gut it out type of thing. So Hopkins is one of those guys that he can do this. So I'm not completely off of Hopkins, but I will say that you want to use caution here because re-aggravation is a thing. And if he goes into this game and re-aggravates the ankle injury, you could see him, with a 2 for 24 line and knocked out in the second quarter. Having said that, this is a monstrous matchup. Last week, the Miami Dolphins roasted that Chargers secondary. Of course, the Chargers are going to have Joey Bosa today, so that's helpful. But I would say that Hopkins is a risky start, but there is plenty of fantasy opportunity there. He could still have a nice game. It's just risky. So do what you got to do with that information. If you have any Hopkins versus so-and-so start sits, drop them in here. All right, so we're getting a couple more questions. Beck's dog wants to know, Puka Nacua or DJ Moore? I tell you what, this might be a bit of a surprise answer, but I'm going to go with DJ Moore. I know he only had 2 targets last week. I think that's partially or mostly matchup driven there with the Green Bay Packers. The Packers do have, of course, that a nice couple of corners there, but I think that DJ Moore, you got to give him one more week. We drafted him as Justin Fields' #1 target, and only getting 2 targets last week feels like kind of an outlier. It feels like that situation, like if DJ Moore was having, just doing his thing for 3 or 4 weeks, and then week 5 he had 2 targets, we just kind of shrug and be like, all right, whatever, and we go stick him in our lineup in week 6. But it happened week 1, so we're all freaking out about it. I think DJ Moore is in for a bounce back game this week. It is a nice situation because nobody can run on that front there in Tampa, so they have to throw. And I think DJ Moore is in for a bounce back this week. I'd be fine with DJ Moore over Puka Nacua this week. So, Bex, my pick is DJ Moore. Scott Gilroy wants to know PPR, McLaurin or Shaheed. So, my thing about Rashid Shaheed this week is that I'm a little bit concerned about the volume this week for the Saints wide receivers. Last week they played Tennessee, who's got a really stout front seven, and they stopped the run well. Tennessee was one of the, I believe they were fourth best in fantasy points allowed to running backs last year. They allowed the fewest rushing yards per game to running backs last year. The Tennessee defense just they stop the run. That's what they do, and so you have to throw on them, and that's what the Saints did last week, and it led to Olave, Chris Thomas, Rashid Shaheed all having nice games last week. So because of that, I think their numbers were a little bit inflated. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Shaheed. I went and picked him up everywhere because I do think that he's got some season long potential. But I'm just a little bit worried about this week with Carolina. The Saints have a pretty good defense, and I don't know that that we're going to see the volume that we want to see. The Saints are going to try to run the football. The Panthers gave up 155 yards rushing to the Falcons last week, so I think that's how the Saints are going to attack it. And I'm a little bit concerned about Shaheed. He was number 3 on the field last week, and I think that's going to continue to be the case. You're going to want to play him in high volume matchups. So my pick is McLaurin. I know he's going to be opposite Surtain this week, and that makes me a little bit concerned. But I think I like him being on the field more than Shaheed, and that's all we can do at this point in the season. So I'm going with Terry McLaurin. Scott, it's tough, man. You got a tough situation there. Shaheed could certainly have end up having a decent game. And I love my mowers showed up here on Sunday morning. That's fantastic. That'll help the live feed, everybody. All right. So my pick is McLaurin. It's just barely though. If you're feeling it on Shaheed, go for it. My analysis about that Tennessee game last week, I believe, is on point. But then again, it doesn't mean that the Saints aren't going to have to throw the ball this week. And Shaheed is certainly a fine option. All right, Brian wants to know, pick 1.5 point PPR, Hopkins, Flowers, or JSN. Ooh, boy, that's a tough one. So I said drop your Hopkins questions in the chat. Brian, I don't like this question. That's a tough one. Honestly, I'm leaning towards going with the rookie here in Zay Flowers. They schemed up a lot of touches for him last week. He looked absolutely fantastic. He played a lot. He was the second most in snaps and routes participation. So I think I'm going with Flowers here. Hopkins worries me just because of the re-aggravation. I just don't want to put a guy like that in my lineup in week 2. See if he gets through this week's game and get back to it next week. Jackson Smith and Jigba, he looked fantastic. I said this earlier in the stream, but let me say he was clearly, though, third in route participation. If my numbers are, I'm remembering this off the top of my head, but I think he was 66% route participation, whereas Lockett and Metcalf were over 90%. So JSN is clearly still a third. However, he earned targets at an elite rate, getting a 24% targets per route run number, which was highest on the team. So I like JSN. And Hopkins has a great matchup, but I think I'm going with Flowers there. I think we're going to see the real Baltimore offense this week, and I think we're going to see the Bengals bounce back as well and play better. So I think they're going to need to throw. Brian, my pick is Flowers there. All right, Falcons drip. One of my big supporters. What's up, brother? Josh Kelly or Pacheco, half PPR. So that's a great question because I'm not high on Josh Kelly this week. But Isaiah Pacheco is mired in a 3-back committee. I'm only running with Pacheco in situations where I have to. And that's situations where I really don't have another option or I'm in a deep league. Because even though Pacheco had 4 catches last week, that strikes me as a bit of an outlierish result. And I know that we could see it as, oh, that's encouraging. But really, I see that as an outlier because it was several checkdowns to him. I believe only one of them was a design screen. So I'm just going to go with Josh Kelly here as the volume play. I don't love the matchup. We all know by now, if we're on Twitter, we know the fact that the Titans, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, that the Titans just they stop the run well. They don't give up a lot of fantasy points to running backs. I'm worried about Kelly this week, but it's volume. And if he stays involved in the passing game at all, like Austin Eckler does, and a lot of times what teams try to do against a front like Tennessee is go to the screen game as sort of a short running game, then I think that he could see a couple catches as well, maybe pop in a touchdown. Whatever the case may be, I think you want to sign up for Kelly's 15 to 20 touches instead of trying to rely on Pacheco as part of an ugly three-man committee. Don't love the matchup, but my pick is Kelly anyway. All right. Haas wants to know Shaheed or Josh Downs potential rest of the season. Well, I like Josh Downs, but I'm not all in on the Anthony Richardson passing train quite yet. So, excuse me, still clearing the morning congestion. I know it's really not morning, but I was up late grinding content, and I'm a little froggy this morning. Excuse me for that. But I don't know that I'm on the Anthony Richardson train for his passing ability the rest of the year. I think he's going to be fine. I'm not anti. I think he's going to be fine. But I'm a Rashid Shaheed guy through and through. I think that offense with Derek Carr there, they had a bit of an up and down week last week, but there were still tons of fantasy points to go around for those wide receivers. I love Rashid Shaheed rest of the season. All right, Haas, that's my pick there. Let's see what else is going on here. Oh, Cordero Patterson, surprise inactive. I hope you weren't relying on Cordero Patterson, but in deep leagues, he was a guy that I thought about as being somebody who they might throw the ball a little bit more to this year. And so in really deep leagues, I tried to get Patterson at the end of drafts. I don't know that I'm excited about that anymore after 18 pass attempts in week one, but Patterson's going to be inactive. Anybody else that you're wondering about, let me know. There's a couple narrative situations that we want to talk about. Number one is the Chicago running backs. It looks as though Deontay Foreman's going to be a healthy scratch this week. I have not checked the Bears inactives, but it looks like the Bears are not that excited about Deontay Foreman at this point. So Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert get a chance to lead the way. And I don't know that I love Khalil Herbert as a start, even though I think he's going to get plenty of early down work. The problem is in this offense, we don't get a lot of checkdowns, and we don't see a lot of passing game potential for Herbert as we thought about prior to the season. That materialized in week one. So I think that Herbert makes me a little bit nervous. Roschon Johnson's the guy that I want, and I want to be able to hold him. I don't know that I want to be all in on either guy this week just because Deontay Foreman is not playing. I think I'd like to see how the backfield goes. And this is something that I talked about last week. We're still early in the season. And one of the things that I kept saying last week was we just have to be careful with guys like Quentin Johnston and, I said Jordan Addison and those kind of guys. Tank Bigsby, Zach Charbonnet. We just need to see that usage. And the Bears backfield was one of those. And last week it was an ugly committee. It was just not pretty. So I think that what it comes down to is if you can do it, I would avoid that backfield for right now. And also, I hate the matchup this week against Tampa Bay. So, we're getting an update here on Amari Cooper. Browns wide receiver Amari Cooper, who aggravated a groin injury at practice Saturday, is listed as questionable for Monday night. It's considered unlikely to play against the Steelers. That's not a shock. If you were counting on Amari Cooper, get him out of your lineup. That's not a shock at all. It sounds to me like he aggravated the injury yesterday at practice and had to leave early. Brutal blow for Amari Cooper managers because he had a weird week one and the bad weather and the blowout sort of did the splits when he fell one time, and that's where he picks up a groin injury. And now he's re-aggravated that injury. Hopefully, he's only going to sit this week and he'll be back next week. But those kind of things can linger. We just want Amari Cooper to get healthy before he comes back, obviously. But it looks like he will not play. That's wheels up for Elijah Moore And the guy that nobody's talking about there is Donovan Peoples-Jones. I might be the only one in the world talking about Donovan Peoples-Jones, but I will say this. He played the most snaps last week, and he ran the most routes as well. He was right there with Elijah Moore. So I think, the guy who suffered last week was Amari Cooper, and I really believe that Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to be a factor. I don't think we can sit here and discard his week one performance. He was out on the field. And I think, though, that what we have to realize is that Elijah Moore is going to be a factor, Amari Cooper or not. So I really love the situation this week against Pittsburgh. The 49ers threw all over that Steelers secondary last week, and I think that that's going to happen again this week to Pittsburgh. Now, it's going to be a little bit tougher matchup, of course, going into Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football. But the runway is cleared for Elijah Moore, but don't forget about Donovan Peoples-Jones. All right. Falcons Drip says, Kelly is who I was leaning towards. Great minds think alike, man. Roll with Josh Kelly. He's going to get 15 to 20 touches. Hopefully 3 of those are catches. And, we have a good foundation for a good fantasy day. He also says, could go Dotson. Oh, man, why'd you have to complicate things? Because I like Jahan Dotson this week. I'll tell you what. I mean, Kelly's the safer play because he's getting those opportunities. So if you feel like you need the safe play, you need to grind out the points, then I go with Kelly. But if you want the upside, I'm looking at Dotson because he certainly has that 2 TD upside. So I generally I'm like I said to all my followers, you all know this, I'm a nit. I'm one of those guys that I'm just going to play. I'm going to make the safe play. I'm going to make the play that makes me feel like I've got that floor to rely on. I still think Kelly could pop in a touchdown. I just don't think that's how you beat the Titans. So I probably have a lean towards Dotson. Sorry to make this more complicated for you, but you're the one who dropped in with Dotson at the last minute. All right. So we got all right, we got any more questions? Because we got about 5 minutes left on the AMA. If you have anything about waiver wire, any fantasy questions whatsoever, rest of season, start, sit, hit me with it right now. Now is the time to do it. Something that I'm paying attention to this week, I'm looking at whether or not A.J. Dillon can turn in a performance this week because he's got a good situation here to take a hold of this backfield. And we have seen bell cow usage with A.J. Dillon when Aaron Jones has been out in the past. The problem is Aaron Jones looked great last week against a bad Chicago defense, and A.J. Dillon looked awful. So I'm starting him in a couple leagues where I have to start him in deeper leagues. But I'm a little bit concerned, and I want to see A.J. Dillon turn in a nice performance this week. I hope it doesn't become the Patrick Taylor show, but you never know because, like I said last week, it was bad for A.J. Dillon. I hope that he gets a nice bump this week with Aaron Jones out. And like I said, we've seen bell cow usage from the Packers before when Aaron Jones has been out. They've given Dillon those catches that Jones gets. They've given him the 20 carries and the goal line looks. So hopefully that's what we're going to see from Dillon today, but that's something I'm paying attention to. All right, we got a couple more questions here before we get out. Danny's got another one. Pitts or Musgrave? I don't see how you can play Kyle Pitts at this point. I'm not saying that he's not going to have some nice games this season, but I don't see how you can play him. Luke Musgrave's in a great spot with Christian Watson and Aaron Jones out this week. Musgrave could have had a monstrous game last week if Jordan Love throws him a better pass at like the 10-yard line or 15-yard line or whatever that was. He tripped and fell and couldn't get into the end zone. But Musgrave is my pick there, Danny. I just don't see how you could be starting Kyle Pitts yet. We've got to see this Falcons offense do something and throw the ball. And it's going to be a moving target because let's say he goes out and has 4 for 50 and a touchdown and you put him back in your lineup. He's very easily, one of those guys that can give you the 3 for 19 every week. So I'm not putting Pitts out there if I can help it. So Danny, my pick is Musgrave there. Haas has got another one for me. Mostert, Dalvin Cook, or Kyron Williams. That's Mostert easily for me. Easily. I'm not a Dalvin Cook guy just because of the split there. I also don't think that the matchup is very good at all playing against the Dallas front. So, and Kyron Williams has a particularly brutal matchup as well against the San Francisco front. So I'm going Raheem Mostert there. Absolutely is my pick over Cook and Kyron Williams, Haas. All right. So Haas says I was trying to wait one more week for Kyron before I put him in my lineup, but the other two are facing tough defenses. Yeah, I mean, I get it, man. I don't want to put Kyron in there either against San Francisco. So I'm rolling with Mostert. JC, no problem, Danny. Thanks for showing up, man. I'll be here every week at 11:30 as the inactives come out. JC wants to know Bills or Colts defense. I think I'm probably going the Colts defense this week. That's one of those where you got a banged up CJ Stroud and they got a banged up Texans offensive line. I think the Colts could feast this week. That's a sneaky play. I don't think the Las Vegas offense is that bad. So I'm not rolling with the Bills there. I'm going with the Colts DJC. Brian Davidson says Hayden Hurst or Dalton Schultz, or should I go hunting and waivers? I'd probably take Schultz there, even though it's kind of gross. Brian, I don't know what's on your waiver wire, but I would look to the waiver wire because I think there's some guys out there like Logan Thomas. Zach Ertz is on some waiver wires. Those are guys I would consider above the two guys that you've got there. I don't mind Hayden Hurst. It's just that the Saints are fairly good against the tight end. And last week, Hurst, he was okay, but the touchdown buoyed his fantasy numbers. And I don't know that we can count on that every week, obviously. So if you can go to the wire and pick somebody up, Brian, I think that's what I might be doing. So Haas, Brada, thank you. You bet, Falcons. No problem, buddy. JC, appreciate the support, brother. Purdy or Daniel Jones? JC, I'm firing up Daniel Jones one more week. I don't. I'm not going to throw him to the wolves yet. That was a weird thing last week, and I've been saying all week. As far as Dallas, the Giants, the Bengals, and the Browns, I'm throwing out the results from last week. It's just they were all weird situations. It was the 40-0, and then it was the bad weather in Cleveland with the blowout there. So two blowouts. It's very weird statistical situations. I'm still sticking with Daniel Jones this week. I think that matchup's a little bit tougher than maybe we thought it was going to be, and it looks like Gannon has that defense playing well. They were harassing Sam Howell all week last week, but I'm still going with Daniel Jones. I think Brian Dable is a guy that I trust, and I think he's going to be fine. Brian, you bet, buddy. Yeah, Brian, I'd go with Ertz. Absolutely. Dalton Schultz at this point, I think that possibly he stays in the block more. You got no Tunsil. You've got injuries all across the Texans offensive line. Now, maybe they use him on 2 and 3 yard routes all day and he gets 6 for 30 or something like that. But I don't see the upside there in Schultz or Hurst. So I'm rolling with Ertz. Brian, absolutely, that's who I go with. All right, Danny Dimes, let's go, JC. I got him as well in one league, so we're gonna roll with Danny Dimes. All right, it is noon. That's my half-hour start sit. If you got any more, drop them in here right now as I close out the show. I will try to get to the last couple if we've got any more. Otherwise, the show is only designed to be 30 minutes and get your questions in. Talk about the inactives list, but don't forget the recap is DeAndre Hopkins is playing, but is risky, although he does have a nice matchup. And it looks as though Amari Cooper will not play. So get Amari Cooper out of your lineup or have a pivot for Monday night if you really think that you want to wait on him. And don't forget the Bears running back situation has changed up a little bit as well with Deontay Foreman being inactive. Bex Dogs got it one more for me. All right, PPR, pick 2. Rachaad White, James Cook, or David Montgomery. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going Rachaad White one more week. He was real bad last week, and I've got to start him in a league. But it's a great situation. It's a Bears defense that Aaron Jones ripped up last week. So I'm going to give Rachaad White another week. He did get 19 opportunities, 17 carries, and 2 catches. Hopefully, he gets all those opportunities this week. So Rachaad White's my pick right off the top. And then I think I'm going to go James Cook. David Montgomery is a guy that I like and that I've been on all off season, but that Seattle defense was pretty tough last week on those Rams running backs. So the Rams really struggled to run the ball. And if that's going to be the case for the Seattle defense, that's one game sample size. So we don't know that. But Montgomery's going to be a guy that has to rely on a ton of volume and high leverage touches at the goal line because it doesn't look like he's going to get a lot of receiving work. And we never thought that he was anyway. So without a lot of receiving work against a possibly tough matchup, I'm going to try to sit Montgomery and go with the James Cook upside there because I really think that even though I have some concerns about James Cook, as you saw in my Drew's Clues this week, he's the guy I'd rather have for upside. And I also think the Raiders matchup is absolutely stellar. Last year, the Raiders were worst in the league to receiving backs. They gave up the most catches, the most receiving yards last year to running backs out of the backfield. I still think the Raiders defense is suspect. And that's what I go for is that upside with James Cook. I think he's going to get plenty of touches, just like Montgomery will, but we might see some more catches because it is a PPR. That's real important for you. And also, that Raiders defense is just terrible. So go with James Cook and Rashad White there. All right, Bex, I think that'll do it. Anybody else, drop your questions in right now. We're wrapping up. We're getting out of here. It's time to watch some football in a little while. I got to go get me some lunch, say goodbye to the kids. They're heading to a birthday party. Tough news for old Drew here. He gets to watch football in a house by himself for a couple hours. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. It's going to be an amazing Sunday. Let's go win some football games. Folks, it's been my pleasure. I am your fantasy football lawyer, Drew Davenport. Don't forget to check me out on Twitter, Drew Davenport FF. And don't forget to check out my Patreon channel, patreon.com/fantasy football lawyer. Tons of exclusive content all the time over there. This past week, we had Drew's Clues, and we also are going to have analysts every single week. Upcoming this week, we've got Scott Pianowski to come on the Patreon channel and talk about waiver wire pickups. And we're going to have an analyst on, a big name analyst on every single week to talk about your waiver wire on Tuesday afternoons. And that's exclusively on the Fantasy Football Lawyer Patreon network. Thank you so much for joining me for this week. That's going to do it for my live stream. Let's get out of here and go win some fantasy games. Love y'all. Thank you for the support.